Greetings, YouTube. An ongoing conversation about the merits of manliness have been meandering about Western academia and media fronts for several decades now. Are men finished? Is masculinity itself toxic? TEDx seems to variously believe so, with Bill Pozobin, Joe Ehrman, Ryan McKelly, Colin Stokes, and the greatly overpraised Dr. Jackson Katz, all variously elucidating the ways in which atavistic remnants of a violent past embedded within our culture transform men into monsters. The message is essentially that we brainwash boys to put their emotions aside and man up to act in spite of fear, anxiety, risk, or pain. This, we are to believe, is an intolerable evil, one that we should combat by redefining what it means to be courageous. Consider, as a case in point, the following video from the former vice president of JP Morgan Chase, brought to you by Big Think.
It is true that on Wall Street and among traders, there's a lot of endorphins being produced. And in fact, they've studied traders in the London stock market, London traders, and they found that, sure enough, that those who take on significant risks may have increased levels of testosterone. They found correlation between those with high testosterone and high risk taking, and also causation. Some studies show that if you take a nasal spray of testosterone, you're more likely to take financial risks. So it's not just in Wall Street; it's also in a lot of financial decisions when you're in a casino, right? Those who have certain chemicals are more likely to take certain financial decisions. Well, the most important thing about an investor is someone who can detach themselves from irrational activity. For example, one investor who I know went to Japan recently and looked at all kinds of banks and companies and tried to figure out what should he invest in Japan. But when he came home to America, he decided he was not going to invest in Japan for 3 to 6 months. And why is that? Because he felt that he may be subject to the availability bias, meaning that the more likely you can recall something, the more familiar you are with something, the more likely you're going to invest in it. That's why people play the lottery. My dad plays the lottery every single week, and I ask him, Dad, why do you play the lottery? He says, well, I see people winning the lottery on the news. I may win it. I said, well, you're not seeing all that, hundreds of thousands of people that are losing. So professional investors can create checklists to start rooting out their bias, whether it's things that they can easily remember or things that they're familiar with, and they can check themselves to make sure they're not making irrational financial decisions.
All right, I'm going to stop it there. You get the gist of the video. It's only 2 minutes. I only played 1 minute and 40 seconds of it, but you get the gist. Embedded within this video is quite a bit of background emotion surrounding the troubles, tribulations, and betrayals of Wall Street. Corruption, deception, fraud, outright sociopathy all immediately come to mind for most people when people begin to talk about that most infamous of financial districts. Now, Kabir Sehgal, the gentleman we just listened to, in this short little clip, links all of this to high testosterone levels in the alluded to investors. The risk-taking behavior, which is true. The irrationality, which I'm not so sure is true. But the problem, you see, isn't a system that isn't designed for humans with natural and healthy, in fact declining, levels of their own natural chemicals. That couldn't be it. It couldn't be that people are entrusting their money to an industry they know little to nothing about after being given misleading messages about the degree of risk involved in such investments. It is the chemical core to male identity, masculinity itself. That is the problem that we at Wall Street wish you to associate with all the problems of today's banking and finance market. Whatever you do, keep the personal responsibility of the companies and their officers, I'm looking at you, Mr. Sehgal, out of focus. The problem is testosterone. So now, where is our Big Think video blaming overpopulation problems on excessive estrogen levels in society? All that fertility is the issue, right? Or the problems associated with loose shoelaces on gravity, right? But I should be fair, they do have a point. It's not as though Sagal is incorrect in pointing out the correlation between testosterone and decreased aversion to risk-taking, after all. Lest anyone forget to notice, the link between testosterone and boldness directly contradicts virtually all of the TEDx experts' consensus on society being at fault for the nature of boys and men, this cultural construct and all that. The traits are chemically innate, making all the criticisms of society's treatment of boys a cover for a condemnation of male nature itself. I suspect that this is unintentional, just my own opinion, but the truth is anyone's guess. In any case, by immediately associating the justified outrage towards Wall Street with the male hormone, the very carefully unsaid insinuation that perhaps men need to be a little bit less manly casually shifts from a conclusion that requires evidence into a premise to be casually accepted. Who, after all, is tolerant of the misbehaviors of investors? So let us then consider a world less saturated in masculinity. And although there was actually very little risk in the white-collar adventures and subprime mortgage voodoo, as far as I'm aware, only one banker actually went to prison for the criminality culminating to a climax in 2008. That aside, let us suppose that some chemical reduction in male risk aversion really could reduce instances of problems like Wall Street, hypothetically speaking. What then? Investment banking and stockbrokering, or is it breaking, perhaps, are not the only jobs affected by one's tolerance for danger. Where would be our firefighters, our soldiers, our police officers? Where would be our journalists, for that matter? Where would be the laborers and the craftsmen, the carpenters, welders, and electricians who must learn to work with dangerous tools? Where would be our truck drivers after they see another jackknife or roll off the road? I don't think anyone would argue that such jobs would vanish in a suddenly testosterone-deprived society, since the demand for such work will always exist, no matter how many first-world academics believe in their island of abstractions and theory, that we live in a post-industrial information economy. But the nature of the people operating them and their effectiveness would certainly change. How might a more rational, risk-averse linemen perform their job when high winds take down the power to your neighborhood? How about soldiers who guard you while you sleep from those who don't have the power to similarly enfeeble? It is easy to forget about the wall plug you rely on to type about how masculinity is no longer needed, when you aren't personally responsible for installing and fixing them. Even if maleness itself could be held reasonably responsible for the corruption of the finance world, the harm would still not outweigh the civilizational benefits of masculinity. As feminist Camille Paglia observed, one of the major benefits of testosterone is civilization itself. So the point I want to drive home here is that form follows function. This is not merely a rule of thumb for architecture. It's more like a law of nature in human psychology. What is beautiful to us is mostly beautiful because it is beneficial for us to find it beautiful. Men like women with traits that indicate fertility. And lo, women are attracted to men with traits that indicate the capacity to provide and protect for them. Foremost among these traits, the emotional stability and the confidence and the patterns of speech and posture that signal the prerequisite courage to do these things. Should also be noted that men look for these traits in other men, since the ability to pull one's weight in a team, a quality as important in our ancestral past as it is today, is also highly predicated on one's ability to subjugate your own self-interest for the sake of performance. In other words, risk tolerance. In other words, courage. So from a grand bird's eye view and from a gut level emotional view, both men and women are attracted to men who are strong and honorable and courageous. We like men who can take risks. It appears that only in the middle between the very long term and the very short term, do we find theories condemning the inborn nature of men and the culture that has come about to reinforce and celebrate that? Now, why these academics, pundits, and social critics work so hard to convince the public that men are everything wrong with society will have to be subject of another post. So to conclude, 2 better-than-TED quality lectures about the nature of and value of masculinity that you ought to check out if you are interested are Karen Straughn's video and Jack Donovan's video that I hope that'll link in the load bar. So hopefully that'll clear things up about the nature of manliness, and feel free to comment and criticize in the comment section. Thanks a bunch.